Well, good morning, good afternoon once again. My name is Tony Salas. I'm here for the November version of a diesel drivability roundtable. It's been quite a few months since I've done a roundtable, been traveling, been teaching, been busy with stuff. So therefore, had to throw in another roundtable. So we will have a December roundtable too. So definitely we'll have that going on. Um, those of you that are new, welcome. We usually do this every month, but like I said, I've been slacking. Call me slacker, sorry, but we're trying to work with this. Hopefully, you can all hear me well. Say hello on the chat. You're welcome to turn on your microphones if you have any comments. I have a few things I'm going to talk about. And obviously, hopefully, some of you will pitch in and throw in your 2 cents worth too. So your participation is welcome too. So as you click on your name up there, you're going to be able to unmute or show your video, whatever you want to do. But for the meantime, I guess I'll get started on talking about what's going on. First of all, been busy with training, doing a lot of training. Went to a few events. I got a few events coming up here in Portland, Oregon area. So I'll be 2 weeks in that area doing training at two shops, and then I'll be doing a training at a B&B Auto Supply, doing a web class there too. So therefore, I get to go to lovely, cold, rainy Portland area. So that's coming up here after Thanksgiving holiday. So with that said, what can I tell you? Well, things continue to be the same routine in terms of what I've seen going on with our field. In other words, our light duty diesel. Yeah, some areas the automotive sector has slowed down a little bit, but it seems that diesel doesn't stop. In other words, the jobs are still there. I haven't done much diagnostics here at home because I've been traveling and teaching, but I got my share waiting for me next month. However, though, the story is always the same, but the things that I see changing are the fact that there is a lot and a lot of issues regarding the after treatment, unlocking a get out of D rate, and also issues with the common rail too as well. So yeah. Now this past what is it, 2 weeks ago, the Apex SEMA show was in town. Got to meet some people, got to talk to some people, worked a little bit with the Alliant Power booth, and also did my other contract too that I was working there too. But um, what was interesting is actually I'm going to try to have them next month, but it was this company called Aztec. Maybe some of you have seen it. And what it is that you actually purchase a pod that actually interfaces with the diagnostic link connector. And what they do is that, no, it's not a remote. In other words, it's not a remote. They don't do diagnostics for you. No, so let's say I want to work on a WI tech, right? But I don't have WI tech. Or let's say I want to reflash with a WI tech. And the reason why I picked WI tech is for that the simple reason that you got to pay big money for having the WI tech and subscriptions. So what they do is they actually go ahead and house remotely the scan tools, so you can remotely control the scan tools. So in other words, the way I understood it, and I don't think I'm wrong, but the way I understood it was that you actually connect to the vehicle, you log into their website, you get access to the WI tech, for example, and then at that point you're working remotely. In other words, you're using the scan tool, but you're not have it there present. So therefore, it's all, in other words, away from you, but you are able to, because I get a lot of questions about people saying, hey, how can I do reflash and reprogramming? Well, there's a few companies now doing it. And if you know of one, let me know on the chat. But in this case, let's say you need the GM Global, you need the WI Tech, you need IDS. This company allows you to actually have those scan tools available to you. So you're not paying all these different scan tool companies like I do, because I don't use them a whole heck of a lot, especially the WI Tech. So that's why in the past you guys may have seen me use Gel Test, may have seen me use my Snap-on Zeus and so on. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is this company is now offering the ability for you to use an OE scan tool, okay, an OE scan tool, and you are able at that point to reprogram, scan it, whatever you want. So therefore, this is it. Now, for those of you that have a phone in front of you, there's their website, and if you want to scan that QR code with your phone, I'll have it there for a minute or two so you guys can scan it, and that'll take you to the website if you want some information about it. Because And believe me, I haven't used them yet. I'm not going to vouch them, but hopefully I'll have them as a guest next month in December. I'm going to try to have them. But what it is that it's, again, the ability to use a factory scan tool remotely, but yet have it connected to your vehicle via all internet. So that's pretty cool. Talk about technology, huh? So in this case, that actually works very well, and I can understand how could that work, because I actually get access to many scan tools for some of you that I've done work with remotely. So therefore, you can do the same as well. So definitely a pretty cool thing to have. So if you haven't tried it, you can actually scan it and they'll actually give you some free information so you're not committing to it, but it kind of gives you the information regarding it, their services. So in this case, to me, it saves a lot of dollars and cents when it comes to having the challenge of having all the OE tools, So therefore, once again, did everybody, if you want to scan the QR code, let me know if you still need it there. But again, it's as tech there, as you can see there, and you can go to the website and sign up and get some information about it. So I guess the only purchase you have to do is obviously the pod that connects to your diagnostic link connector via internet. So therefore, that'll actually help you. So I can't stress that enough about how that might be a cure for those of you that have the financial burden of having too many scan tools, always scan tools, and there are some that probably sit for a while before you use them, but yet you got to pay your fees. So, it just adds up, like I just need to update my Snap-on Zeus. I just got a bill for 1,600 bucks, or I can go 100 bucks a month. Then you got IDS, that's another, what is it, 800, 900 bucks plus. And then you got the global, and it just adds up all the different scan tools that you have to have. So again, you're not paying for the individual ones, you're paying for access to them, and then you just pay the one fee. So therefore, you're not buying all these scan tools. So welcome to take a look at them. I'm just throwing a 2 cents worth of what I found out. But like I said, I'm going to try to have them next month here as a guest so they can explain more what they do. So there you go. Any comments, let me know. But again, you can scan the QR code there. All right. So that's a biggie there because like I just, right now the phone's been buzzing already this morning and I got a few text messages and these text messages are about, I need to reflash update and they got to get somebody out there to, do a TSB. So therefore, that's what it is. So with that said, there you go. Now I was pulling up some old roundtable discussions from the past, and one thing that I see guys not yet well learned is the L5P Duramax. I'm going to try it. I did offer a L5P Duramax webinar, and yes, it was for a fee, but I wanted to review a few things about the L5P that some of you guys may not have learned yet. Now, I take it you guys have been working because they've been around since 2017. And in this case, we all know about some of the pigtail connector issues, right? We all know about the pigtail connection issues. But the one thing I wanted to tell you is that, we've been talking about at length for various different people that I do training for, from Lucas to align part to everybody I do work for, is the fact that you need to use the misfires counter, the misfire display to help you out what might be going on with these Denso common rail injectors. The return values off of these injectors are so minimal. I mean, it's so little. I mean, we're not talking about a lot of return. So, but a quick thing that you may want to do is you may want to use your scan tool to actually observe the misfire counters. And what I mean by misfire counters, current and historical that are available through a GM compatible scan tool to tell you what's going on. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention too is let's not forget about mode 6. Now, those of you that haven't had mode 6, we're probably going to offer later on a mode 6 webinar. But mode 6 is a good, helpful thing. Next time you play with your, universal, maybe you have an Autel, maybe you have a Snap-on or a Zeus, whatever a scan tool it is, a launch, you may want to try to go into OBD2 generic mode or generic functions and get into the actual, not the monitors, but actually the mode 6. MOD $6, it's going to say, or O6. And what it is that it allows you to let the computer do the testing for you. Because as you know, per emission law, those cylinders are individually monitored for any kind of misfires. So therefore, you can see the status of the test, see if it's passed or not. And yes, it will display it as passed or not. So like I said, we're going to try to have a webinar on that coming up here to help you out with Mode 6. But we use it a lot on Fords, from the 6.7s to the 6.0s. That kind of helps you tell you what might be going on with the cylinders too as well. Obviously, nothing substitutes the power balance graph, but in this case, on a GM L5P, though, what you might want to look at, especially for that fuel quantity, fuel timing code, because the truck will come in running fine. You'll test drive the truck will run great. I mean, I've had quite a few of them. And in this case, it's keep setting that code. The other thing is, like I've said before this, and it still happens, and I'm sorry for those of you that come and watch this frequently, it's probably embedded in your head for me saying it so much, is that please note, these codes require a decel event, okay, a deceleration event. So if you're not actually performing a deceleration event, you're not going to be able to see if that code fails again until the customer tags. You're like, well, the code didn't come back. Well, of course, because they didn't get a chance to run the test. Why? Because you didn't run a deceleration event. So therefore, please note, those quantity and timing codes do require a deceleration event. So read the fine print of conditions to run the code when you are working on these L5Ps. Actually, any truck, but in this case, want to read that to see if you have simulated the conditions to run the code. And I take it you all know by now that a code is a test, so therefore there must be conditions to run these codes to actually do your testing. Now, with that said, I'm sure you guys are seeing more issues than what I can keep up and what I'm seeing here. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is that let's not forget that we do have a tank, right? We do have our fuel tanks. I know the chart from GM here is showing you two tanks. One is a primary, one is a factory secondary tank or supplemental tank. But what I do want to focus on is, as you know, these L5Ps, like the General Motors products, continue to use one fuel filter from the factory. Now, I haven't looked at a 24-25 model. Okay, so those of you that have, let me know. But as far as I know, we only got one fuel filter located somewhere up front of the fuel tank or next to the fuel tank in the back. Now, with that said, number 6, remember, the lift pump pressure is actually being used to fuel or supply fuel to the, as we call it, the indirect injector. So it is not like the LML where we had the fuel supplying that injector was the return, or the, excuse me, that's wrong, the crankcase fuel from the CP4 injection pump. So therefore, this is using lift pump pressure and volume. So if you got yourself an issue with rail pressure, okay, time has gone by a little bit, but the original thing we were discussing is you want to check that number 7, which is your fuel rail pressure sensor, which is a 2-in-1 sensor. Therefore, what you want to do is make sure that it is got the update in it. What traditionally we have said in the past is you want to pull the connector off and see if it's loaded with dielectric gel. Yes, dielectric gel, that's what you're going to find in it. So therefore, you got to make sure if it's updated or not, especially if you're working on a 17 to about a 20 model. Now, at that point, you got to make sure it also has the latest flash update too, because there have been numerous issues with the rail pressure, in other words, the common rail system. So therefore, that addresses several issues when it comes to the rail pressure. Now, when you look at the scan tool, which I will repeat and show one more time, please note that we are going to discuss, again, showing you the, in other words, the volume test, pressure test. And I'm going myself crazy. Hold on. What I mean by that is traditionally on any common rail, and I don't care whose common rail it is, we've always had some minimums and maximums we want to look at. And what I mean by that, since I was just talking about the indirect injector, is we're telling you now to go ahead and do the traditional volume test. Minimum you should see is, again, that 1 liter in 30 seconds. So don't be afraid to disconnect the line. I got a picture of it here coming up, but disconnect the line and let's do a volume test. Why am I trying to simplify it? Because as you know, number 16 and number 14 is the fuel pump control module and also the fuel pump. In other words, the lift pump. So lift pump control module and the lift pump itself. So therefore, that's number 16 and number 14, as you can see on the chart. So therefore, if you suspect you got something going on with your lift pump that is affecting your rail pressure, because as we said before, always check the low pressure side before addressing a high pressure side issue. You got to make sure you got good lift pump pressure and volume. I know the scan tool will give you that fuel pressure reading. Again, you'll know you'll have a sensor there. However, though, you got to do a volume test. See if you got the volume coming in, right? So these trucks may have over 100,000 miles already, for all I know, the ones you're picking up. Therefore, we want to see a minimum of 1 liter in 30 seconds. That still works even on these vehicles, which we have done in shops already. So let's not forget that. Okay. So therefore, definitely want to pay attention to, again, the volume coming in. So you're obviously need to understand that on number 6, that indirect injector, it is located way downstream of the vehicle. In other words, it's located, well, actually look close to the fuel tank, but it's actually down there. So be aware of that on the Silverado Sierra trucks. The 45, 5500, that's different. But in this case, slightly different. But in this case, they're located back there. Okay. So in this case, what I'm trying to get across is note that the indirect injector is getting, again, lift pump pressure and volume. But any diagnosis of common around these L5Ps means that you're going to check volume. Again, repeating 1 liter in 30 seconds minimum is what we want to see. And then we told you if you want to check the behavior of each injector, you are welcome to look at the current misfire and historical misfire, especially on your misfire data on your scan tool. So play with that as you're doing this. We've also mentioned too that you can use mode 6, right? Definitely want to use mode 6 to diagnose that. So that will help you too as well. There you go. Any comments and questions that have helped you to diagnose the L5P, please post them up or feel free to go ahead and, let us know. In other words, give us some tips of what you have seen. It would definitely help us out. And definitely we want to hear from that too. Okay. Questions? All right. Obviously, this is just a sneak peek on the roundtable. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention too is the fact that don't forget that this common rail system does have that number 9. What is number 9? It's their version of a volume control valve, which General Motors likes to call the FRPR number 2. There's FRPR number 1, FRPR number 2, the one that's located on the pump and the one that's located on the rail. Always remember, as much as it may not be easy to get to, it is your friend to try to find out if you have a contaminated system. It seems that fuel quality has been an issue these past few months that I've come across. As a matter of fact, if you've been to my YouTube page while I was at SEMA, Scotty over at Lion Power took samples of fuel, and boy, that's an eye opener if you haven't seen those samples that he took too. So it's kind of nice seeing somebody else do it apart from me doing the fuel samples of what's going on with today's fuel. So definitely understand that we have to check fuel contamination. Even though these systems are not notorious for grenading themselves, we do, tell you to go ahead and check that because it'd be a sin for you to replace an injector or injectors and find out there is a lot of trash in the system and it's contaminated. So if you want to do a cranking test and see what comes out of the line of an injector, go ahead and do that. Doesn't matter to me, but all I'm saying is you definitely want to do a contamination check, and number 9 is a good thing. Now, I have recommended in the past from dieselcraft.com where you can actually do a test that's a little, paper test or strip test where you want to test for any evidence, hear me correctly, any evidence for DEF fluid, which has worked very well. Actually, I need to reorder some because I'm out, but I've taken it with me from some shops that I've been to, and boy, that's a pretty good eye opener on what we had found. In other words, somebody put maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, whatever ounces and then figured out the problem, what they were screwing up by putting DEF fluid in the fuel. So there could be traces of DEF fluid in the fuel that you have to look out for. So be aware of that too as well. Okay, so yeah, that's the guy we definitely want to be looking at that I mentioned before. So definitely want to make sure we don't have any contamination going on there. So therefore, I can't stress that enough. Now, to the pump itself. I understand we can have lip pump problems. Some of you have already contacted me about this. This is known as a three-phase pump. Okay, those of you have never had the L5P presentation. This is a three-phase pump. So therefore, there are 3 individual wires, look at it this way, that are pulse width modulated going to the pump. So therefore, that fuel pump control module, which is number 16, like we said already, is actually pulsing each wire. So it's pulsing between 0 and 12 volts. So the way you could understand is if it's turning on and off to control the speed of that pump, it's turning on and off at at a high rate of a frequency. Okay, it's probably in excess of over, I believe it's over 400 hertz plus of frequency, right? So yeah, the problem, before I even get started about this fuel pump control module, is the accessibility of it. It's located way in the back, just ahead of the bumper and near the spare tire. So it's not fun to get to on these earlier models. So what am I trying to get at? Is accessibility of the wires to go to the pump are no fun. So there is some general stuff that you can check on the scan tool. And on the scan tool, you're able to look at the fuel pressure. You can see if there are codes because he is actively monitoring its circuits. Okay, the phases are monitored. So on the scan tool itself, you're going to see the UWK, I believe it is, UWK, I believe it is. And what it is, it'll tell you okay or not okay. He's constantly observing those circuits for shorts to grounds and shorts to opens. So with that said, therefore, you can trust the judgment of the computer to try to pick up an intermittent problem. It looks pretty damn good. Why would I have to check that voltage going to each of those wires? Well, the reason why we got to check them is in case we have an intermittent issue with that fuel pump control module. Now, I know what some of you might be doing. You might keep a few of them in stock. I think there's 2 or 3 different versions of this fuel pump control module. And just we'll plug it in, let's see if it works. And well, yeah, but you can also check the actual signals coming in. So what you're going to do is, again, off of each wire, let me get to the wiring diagram now. What you're going to do to these, what you should do is actually get to those wires. So here's the fuel pump driver module, which is the K111. Let's be formal about this. And then there's your assembly with the pump right there, which is the G12A. Now, with that said, again, we see our 3 phases, which is circuit number 120, circuit number 4137, and circuit number 4138. Okay, those are the 3 phases. What is the 744? 7444 is the black, which is ground, right? So number 1, number 2, and number 3, which are these circuits that I just named, are the 3 phases. So if you were to tap into or probe into these wires or connectors, what you're going to see is an average of about 6 to 7 volts average. Because if it's pulsing on and off between 0 and 12, right? What is the average between 0 and 12? It's 6. Because the meter, and we're talking about a meter, not a scope, the meter is actually only able to read the average voltage, and that average voltage would be about 6 point some volts. So don't be surprised you see 6.3, 6.4 volts. That's the first initial check you can do. So therefore, I would go to either on the pump, easier actually to get to the fuel pump driver module. And what you do is you go to pin 8, pin 9, and pin 24. And what you're going to do there is you're going to go ahead and check to see what the voltage is on each one. Okay, so therefore, there you go. That's initial test. Then what you're going to do with the same meter, you're going to go ahead and check the frequency and see if there is frequency. And the frequencies should be reasonably close to each other, all 3 of them. So therefore, that's going to vary with the fuel pump command, the speed, and pressure that it wants. So therefore, you can monitor that too. Now, mind you, you're underneath the truck. You're right at the module. So it's not a whole hell of a lot hard to get to, but it's not in a traditional area where you think you would have this in the engine compartment. But no, it's actually in the, near the spare tire in front of the bumper, the rear bumper. So therefore, with that said, again, you're going to watch again the frequency and the voltage. Again, what was that voltage again? Average of 6 to 7 volts, somewhere around there per each one, because it's pulsing, right? It's always turning on and off to maintain the pump speed. So when do you do this? Well, if you have a truck that's running, obviously you're going to leave it running, right? Maybe you're losing rail pressure intermittently and you want to make sure the pump is not the problem. But I got to tell you, let's be realistic about this. I am not going to be here doing these checks at the wiring at the fuel pump control module if I already did the volume test. In other words, did I check the volume test? Because the volume test passed, I could do it 2 or 3 times too, by the way, where I should see a minimum how much in 30 seconds? Anybody remember? 1 liter, right? So therefore, that's what we want to see there. So if I do have a discrepancy, or maybe you got a problem under load, then therefore we definitely have to check this, what's going on. Now remember though, check your scan tool data, like I said before, because you could set a code, but you can also look at the data on these 3 because there is a data PID for each one of these phases where he's monitoring once again for shorts to opens or shorts to ground. So it's pretty well I would say it's pretty well diagnosed by the onboard computer. So therefore, be aware of that, which is the fuel pump driver control module, which is sending the CAN message over to the ECM. So with that said, again, we want to see that. Now we can take it a step forward. If you really want to do, you would use a lab scope. Now, those of you that are scope savvy, what you can do is take a inductive probe, a low amp inductive probe, and what you could do is clamp on to each of that wire, the gray wire, the yellow gray, and the white and brown. You can actually go ahead and see if the amperage is the same on each one using a scope. So therefore, that's your amp probe is going to be helpful, which I've been meaning to do a scan tool class on that using the probe too. So hopefully I'll get to that soon. But that would be the third way to check it. Because if you have a lift pump problem, the question you're going to ask yourself is the problem the fuel pump driver control module or is the problem the pump itself? Now, I know some of you have replaced both, right? So therefore, that's been maybe a waste of money because you probably didn't need to do the pump or maybe you need to do the pump driver control module. But like everything else, look at everything that goes to this fuel pump driver control module. I mean, apart from the lift pump itself, we got quite a bit of wiring here. Okay. All right, we got quite a bit of wiring here. So therefore, what you're going to see, there's your data communication, your instrument cluster connections too. Again, all of these are messages coming in and out. And in this case, you got your ground, which is G121, which is very important because you'll notice it's about the only ground it has. And then on the other side, you're going to see the powers coming in. So therefore, we see a reductant control relay involved here that supplies power to the fuel pump driver module through a 10 amp fuse. So you can go to the F66 UA and maybe use a test light and go ahead and check to see you got voltage applied at the 10 amp fuse. And then you can also go to the ignition main relay, which also supplies, again, power to that fuel pump driver module through the F34 UA 15 amp fuse. And then another one, F21 UA fuse, 30 amp fuse, see if it's getting power. So again, one's ignition, one's through the relay of the reductant control module, and the other one is straight up from hot battery power. In other words, keep alive power, which you can see there on the chart, B+. Now, the one that they stress from GM on their presentation is that you're going to notice up here, as a matter of fact, let me get my pin up here. You're going to notice they are stressing that you look at this guy right here, which is this wire coming off of the ECM going down to this guy right here, which is pin 18 of the fuel pump driver module. Let me zoom this up because it unzoomed it for me. So therefore, what you're going to see on that pin 18 is you need to make sure it's getting a signal from the ECM. So the ECM is sending a signal going to pin 18, which is something as easy as you using a test light. So what you're going to use a test light to see if it's getting power. So somebody could cycle the key. Let's say you got a crank no start. You want to make sure it's getting a signal before you start going buck wild with the lift pump, and maybe that's your issue. But it has to get a signal. So therefore, that wire coming off of pin 66 of the K20 ECM, that means he sends a signal going to pin 18. You got to make sure you check that before you start checking all the other, three-phase circuits there. So therefore, definitely want to check that there. Again, you want to check that pin 18, go in there. So definitely want to check that. Okay. So make sure you do that as well. So, sound good? So again, you do have a lot of CAN communication. You also got, again, communication instrument panel cluster. But again, once again, you do have the ECM sending a signal for it for startup for priming the system up before you start cranking on it. So there you go. Okay. Any questions? All right, please ask any questions if you have any. Let me take this pin off and we'll continue here. So again, we have to get a good understanding of what's going on here because if you don't have a good understanding, you're going to be pretty lost. So therefore, we don't want you to be lost. So therefore, you do want to know what you're doing with these systems. So again, how much lift pump volume we want to see in 30 seconds? 1 liter. What's the average voltage on each of those phases? It's going to be an average of 6 to 7 volts. Yeah. And we can also see the hertz of frequency. And if you're scope savvy, like I said, you can use a low current amp probe, and clamp on each of those 3 wires and making sure that we have that. So here you can see the P12A6 that I mentioned before on my L5P stuff. is that, they want you to use, and they're saying right there, use a filament style test light. Filament, not LED. That's why I keep both. And in this case, you want to make sure it illuminates, and it should do with key on, it should do a 30-second timeout if there is no crank. So therefore, that's what you want to see there. The good news is that if there is a problem with that fuel pump driver control module, please note there is no programming required, no flashing of it. It's all plug and play as it states right there. So those of you that have never seen these is the way they look. I've shown this before. Again, there's your ECM, there's your fuel pump control module, and obviously your pump assembly itself that goes in the tank there with your three-phase pump. Now note, the three-phase pump is nothing new. If you've been playing with Rams 6.7s with the reductant pump, in other words, the depth fluid pump, that one is a three-phase pump too as well. So the reductant control module they use on those RAM applications are also three-phase. And by the way, just a sidebar, since it's not L5P, if you are working on these RAM, as you know, those applications on those models actually you have to pull down the pump. So it makes a big mess, even though you try to drain as much depth fluid as you can. Please note, it clearly says in the instructions, the connector going to that reductant depth pump, they tell you to put a sandwich bag on it because remember, depth fluid, when it actually dries, crystallizes and it actually can oxidize, meaning it could corrode the connections. So I have seen already a few connections on those RAM applications where we actually saw those connections corroded, causing various different diagnostic trouble codes to be set. So, and cause derate. So therefore, be aware of that as I'm talking about that. So just a sidebar on that. But sticking to the L5P, this is what you're looking at there. So always remember that. So always definitely want to look at your scan data, see what's going on. But you could have situations where you have, like this 2018 L5P I've discussed before with a fuel rail pressure low code set, lift pump pressure code set too as well. Yeah, that makes sense because one affects the other, and your job is to make sure you got an issue. But if you've been working with these, if you haven't been working with these a lot, I guess what I'm trying to say is this, what you see right here, can be caused by the high fuel rail pressure switch. In other words, high fuel rail pressure sensor. So therefore, please make it a point to check that sensor to make sure you check the signal voltages because it's a 2-in-1 sensor, 2-in-1. So therefore, 2-in-1 sensor, you want to make sure there's no issue with that can cause these issues there. So as I look at this older recording that I got right here, let me mute the sound here. Again, you're gonna see your rate. You got a lot of data. I mean, if you haven't played with these L5Ps, boy, do you have data. Desired fuel pressure, your fuel pressure, and then you got your fuel pressure sensor one. That must be for what? Your high pressure side, because I told you there's a sensor that the one that's on the rail is a 2-in-1, so you're gonna get two readings. But then here you're going to see one. Here's an example since I already have it. I'm not going to play it yet. But you're going to see there fuel pump speed too high. That definitely is indicating to me we may have a fuel pump driver control module right there. So if it says no, obviously it's fine. But if it says yes, and you should have a code set with it. However, though, you can see that all on the data too. But since we're talking about all these different actuators and sensors that are used on these applications for the L5P, please note, you're going to notice that you have your fuel pressure regulator control test status right here. So here you're going to say, it's going to say test status, okay. Low voltage test status, okay. So we're testing for three different things for regulator one, regulator two. I'm sure there's over here, the other ones over here too, but I'm just using the one on the left here just to show you how he can tell you whether a circuit has come up with an issue on a given component. So instead of going directly to the codes, this is a good start while you're looking at scan data. So obviously this is an old Verus reading that I got here. The Zeus is the same, but again, you can see they're okay across the board for high voltage, low voltage, and for an open. So it's doing a lot of homework for you. So you guys can see what's going on. And if you take that scan tool into the engine compartment and you go ahead and start wiggling the harnesses, like say to the regulator, some of us use pry bars or long skinny screwdrivers to wiggle those connectors to see if we got an intermittent. That will immediately go from okay to not okay. So therefore, it should set a code, but you should be able to see it. Now, remember, most of your scan tools nowadays out there have a record feature. Like, when I use the Verus or when I use a Zeus, it's automatically recording. So I can always play it back and see if it actually failed intermittently and I didn't catch it by the eye. But in this case, that's what you can see. So therefore, need to utilize that PID data that's available to you through these guys. So therefore, that's what you're going to see. So as I continue to play this recording, you're going to see once again the rest, but there's my circuits for my three phases. So in this case, fuel pump phase, UVW circuits, low voltage test status. There you go. In this case, low voltage and high voltage is what we're seeing here. See that? So therefore, if there's a voltage issue, it's going to set. And if there's an open, there's a short to ground, it's also going to tell you on the scan tool display if it's okay or not okay. So definitely something you got to start utilizing as you're looking at PID data, which requires you to have patience. I'm sitting here with that scan tool, and I'm going to go ahead and look at what actually came up, what doesn't look right, right? So definitely helps you out there. So, but also, as you can see, as I go through all this stuff, there's some generic information like the mass airflow, inlet air temperature, your reference voltage, where is it at, right? That's very useful too as well. But again, the fuel pressures are the ones you also want to be paying attention to. In other words, where's my lift pump pressure? Where's my rail pressure? See what's happening. But if they're both dropping at the same time, that's where you're going to be in a pickle. Because in this case, you're like, okay, is it the lift pump or is it something going on with my rail pressure and my high pressure pump or an injector, right? So as you look at all of this, right, it's a good idea to see what's going on with your injectors too as well. And what did I tell you to use, which I don't have here, is look at your misfires, right? Look at your misfire data and see what's going on with each cylinder. And that means that you're going to sit there for a minute, let her idle, run her cold, run her hot. And what you're going to do is look at that at the same time to help you isolate what's going on. I know that I said at the beginning, you want to check those pigtail connectors on those injectors that could cause those issues too. So therefore, that should set a code for the injector circuit. But if not, it's a good visual for you to do to make sure that there's no issues going on there. So therefore, you gotta go ahead and play with these and understand how they've been working. Now,
Tony,
yes, sir.
if I could jump in here
You got
and
an echo,
just
so lower your
okay,
volume because you got an echo.
is that better now?
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of reiterating what you're saying. We had a truck here about 2 years, a little over 2 years ago, that did exactly what you're describing, and we had trouble deciding whether it was low pressure or high pressure, and eventually found that the information about that rail sensor issue. But the bulletin showed that there would be something wrong with the pin inside the rail pressure sensor, which we did not discover, but did replace the rail sensor and the pigtail and did solve
The issue.
the issue on both what appeared to be a fuel supply and a high pressure problem. So just wanted to put that out there for the guys.
Yeah, it's funny because you're gonna say, oh, high real pressure issue, low real pressure issue. I mean, low lift pump pressure. It's got to be low lift pump. And the thing is, it could be the high real pressure sensor. So, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, thank you. Very good. There, you heard him say that. The other thing I was going to mention is the fact that when we talk about these trucks and you're working with these codes, my biggest pet peeve with a lot of shops that I go to is you're not reading the actual code itself. So this has been a never-ending discussion that I've done in the past, talking about the description, talking about the code, and then conditions for run the code. Like I don't know, an hour and a half ago, I got a text message from another guy, and he's telling me the code. And I'm like, I don't memorize the code, which would require me to go ahead and log on to my service information. If you're going to do that and text me, tell me at least what the code's about because Tony does not memorize codes. No. Tell me what the title and everything's about a code. But it is my hope that you already, whether it be in a Ford or Ram, whatever product it is, that you did a little bit of reading for circuit system description, conditions for running the code, and conditions for setting the code. Because for those of you that haven't heard it, and I haven't talked a lot about this in my previous training, has been the Type A code. As you can see on the bottom, this code, the 12A6, is a Type A code. Now, there's Type A's and Type B's for the most part in powertrain. So therefore, type A means it fails once, boom, check engine light comes on, code is set. Type B code means that it fails twice, but The way it has to fail is that on one key cycle, it might fail. If it does, then it's a pending code. At the next key cycle that you actually turn it on, it's going to try to run the test. If it fails again, now it's an official code. That would be a type B. That's why certain codes that require you to go driving, you should actually modify your test drive, as I've said before, and some guys aren't doing it, which means that when I go on a test drive, I might go 4 or 5 miles, pull over the side of the road, shut it off, wait a few seconds, turn it back on, take off again in the hopes that it runs the test again. In other words, make sure it passes. Now, on these General Motors products, okay, there is specific DTC. And specific DTC is something you type in. If you go to DTC info, go to specific DTC, you can type in that code under specific DTC, under DTC info. And what you could do is look at the status of that code. So if it says this ignition pass or fail, you're going to know if it ran or not. So you're like, well, Tony, how do I know a code did its, if it passed? Well, you can go into specific DTC. There you go. So therefore, pay attention to that too. So always remember when you're confirming issues, there's a fuel pump driver module, but like anything, does it need power and ground too? If you got intermittent issues, yeah, you may want to do voltage drop tests to the driver control module. We saw all the powers that feed that module, and therefore want to make sure it's got a good power and ground. And you notice it only had one ground. So we still could have the traditional issues with leak on the high pressure side, leaky indirect injectors. That's going to happen. And obviously, like Matt just verified, we had a bad sensor. In other words, a rail pressure sensor. And let's not forget, I haven't touched on this guy, and I don't think I'll have time today. Plus, I didn't put a diagram up there. Maybe I will next time. Is that there is the rail pressure sensor we just discussed on the rail, but then there is a low pressure sensor for the lift pump pressure that's located down there, down towards the indirect injector. So we do have ability to read that low pressure. So let's not forget those connections too as well. And I believe this is the bulletin that Matthew was referring to. It's one of the oldies and goodies that him and I shared a while back, or he shared with me. I don't remember who it is. But what I did want to show you is that with today's L5Ps, one thing that I've seen other shops that I've been to is, as you can barely see on the lower left, and even if I blow it up, it's going to be very fuzzy, but please note to check connections, right? Can't stress enough to check the pins and connections because today's pigtail connectors that GM has on these L5Ps have a lot to be desired on the fuel pressure regulator, on the injection pump, everywhere. So make it a habit anytime that you work with General Motors products, whether it being a 3 liter or that 2 liter Duramax, you may want to also check those connectors and those pins and those pigtails, make sure they're not corroded or hurt. Now, many of you are starting to use these Bluetooth like Snap-on. I've been saving my dollars and cents, but I've been spending other money on the Snap-on, so I'm trying to control my balance. But anyways, there is lift pump pressure gauges that you can plumb in there. Here you can see one that was plumbed in here from a shop that I was at a while ago. So in this case, this also gives you the opportunity not only to verify that pressure, not just trust the sensor, but also that's where you would tap in to actually check your volume. So therefore, definitely need to get the habit of doing that. Okay. And what was that volume spec again? Repeating for the fourth time is 1 liter and what? 30 seconds is what you want to look at. Want to make sure you have. So therefore, definitely want to check that. So there you go. Sound good? Any questions? All righty. So I thought I'd talk about that when it comes to dealing with L5Ps. A quick little discussion on that. So, all right. With that said, any comments on this? Any other questions? I guess I'll open it up a little bit before I will continue to move on with this. Any comments? Come on, guys. Throw me something. Throw me a bone here. Any comments? Matthew, you got anything? And where's my buddy Lee? How's my buddy Lee doing? Anybody?
Tony, Matthew here. Maybe moving away from the fuel system here on the
That's fine.
L5P for now, but still L5P related. We have been seeing several trucks here now, 17 to 19s, that around 180, 200,000 miles were developing turbo actuator slash, I guess the arm and going through the VGT is apparently wearing in the bushing or the bushing's wearing out, and setting actuator codes. Just more than anything, just sharing the information with other shops if they're not sure which way to turn. That because we on one of the trucks we first ran into it on, did a lot of other repairs to it, parked it in the lot for the customer to come get it, and he comes and picks the truck up, and the check engine light kicks back on. Tech goes out to look at it again, and now he's got a turbo code we did not have when we had done the injector pigtails and other things to the truck. And we at first, through the diagnosis, felt like it was probably an actuator, but on further review, we're finding that the pin and whatnot was wore, I guess. And we've now seen several of those. I'm just curious if any of the other shops are seeing this even on the 20 and up Ford 6.7, as it is also a Borg setup turbo too. So both kind of information I'm sharing and question too to that, and they don't have to be answered now, but I just wanted to put that out there.
In other words, we pretty much need to put a turbo in it.
Correct. That's what bottom lines end up being. Yep.
Yeah, because the motor's most likely fine. It's probably the turbo. Those motors
Yep.
are pretty damn good. So yeah, definitely want to pay attention to that. Yes, we've seen that before with the 6.7. So therefore, yeah, pay attention to that, guys. Yeah, and let's not forget about the smoke testing. The one thing I'm trying to get a conclusion, and you guys are welcome to chip in, is you get some issues on the whether L5Ps or 6.7s, and you're going to actually smoke test it. And you're going to see quite a bit of smoke coming out of that turbo, especially on the exhaust side of the turbo, in other words, the impeller side. And the question is, what is too much and too little? And that could trip a code or trip a NOx code too as well. So therefore, that's something I'm trying to figure out as we work here. So when I get up to a few shops in a few weeks, I'm going to explore that, see what happens. But have you done smoke tests, Matthew, on those where you found them leaking marginally?
Yes, we have. That has been a question mark for us too. We've tried to decide what is the limit, and yes, we're having trouble to always know what that limit really is. We recently
Yeah.
did one of these turbo installations and returned to the customer, and customer come back to us and said, "Hey, we got a smell of exhaust." And we brought it back in and exhaust did the smoke test and found that there wasn't the catalyst, I guess, wasn't setting just quite tight against the back of the turbo. And yeah, very much that smoke test is a big deal. Obviously, we rectified the problem, but it has been a question mark for us too. How much is the little whispers is too much?
Yeah, because that could trip. And what was the issue you had on that one?
So originally, that particular turbo was replaced because of the same thing. The VGT
Okay.
actuator was the reason why we had replaced it. So that pin was wore, I guess, or bushing, however it is there in the turbo.
Yeah, that's an issue, definitely. So, oh well, it happens. So, but yeah, we got to figure out what's too much because it can trigger some other codes too as well. That could be an issue because your procedures will tell you to go ahead and go and make sure you check for any leakage in the intake, and you're going to see most of that smoke coming out of that turbo. So it's like, well, is that too much? Is that too little? But then guys have sent me videos back and said, hey, this is a truck that does not have this code, but look at the smoke. It's almost the same as what we got with this problem truck. So obviously, what is too much smoke? What is too little smoke? I couldn't tell you at this time. So we're working on that. But for now, all I can tell you is that there is some marginal smoke that comes out of there if you are smoke testing. And guys, if you have not invested in a high pressure smoke machine, they've dropped in price. So therefore, there's a whole bunch of different ones out there you can purchase to actually pressure smoke because again, you can take it up to just a shy over 20 pounds of pressure with smoke, and that helps to diagnose a lot of those intakes. So I cannot stress that enough. And meaning that, and you're going to find leaks you didn't even know you had. So therefore it's been a wonder tool for me. Lord knows I use the holy heck out of mine. So it definitely helps to check intake. So, all righty. Any question? Any other comments? Any other issues that you guys want to add? Come on, I got quite a few guys here. We got 16 people here. And those of you that are watching the recording, well, if you got any questions, you can also put it up there. And by the way, I am now posting these recordings up on my YouTube channel, which is the Diesel Talk with Tony Salas. Definitely putting them up there, so therefore you can read up on about it. All right, Corey posted something. Let's see. Corey says he's been struggling with a 6.7 Ford 2015 with a PO 170 fuel trim bank 1 and B207. Hold on, my glasses are. PO27F reductant quality passes then returns in 2 weeks. Oh, so it takes a while for it to come back. Corey, what have you done, buddy? So anybody like to throw in their 2 cents worth here to help out Corey? Again, we've been struggling with a 674 15 model PO170 fuel trim bank. It'd be nice to know, Corey, what you're from my perspective. Oh, those are my dogs. Sorry, my dogs. Hey, you guys be quiet. Hey, so sorry about my dogs. Mama just came home, so they're barking. My mistake here. Anyways, we've been struggling with a 6.7 PO2 2015 PO17 fuel. I guess what I was trying to get at before I get interrupted by these dogs is what are your fuel trims at? Where's those trims at? I would like to know where you're at on that. See what sticks out because it's on bank one and P2707F reductant quality. That's a different code. So reductant quality addresses into the after treatment system passes and returns in 2 weeks. Well, we definitely got. Have you done? That's another thing I need to know. Have you been doing any kind of? Have you tested the reductant injector for spray and volume too as well? Need to know that. So Corey, throw me something at what you've done, buddy. You can turn on your microphone if you like, or you can just message on the chat so it can help me out what you've done there. So,
Hey, good
eh,
morning. Or
yep. This
hey,
Corey?
yeah, so I had a this worked.
All right,
Um,
buddy.
so anyways, yeah, so the truck's been down to the dealer a couple times for that 170. They fix it for a year and then it comes back. Now that it's out of warranty, of course it's come back. And this redundant quality sensors, one has come back. I I still gotta dig a little bit deeper. It's had all the updates and um, TSBs that Ford did on
Hmm.
it. So just looking for a little help on maybe data scan stuff to look at. Um, the injector works perfect. That's not an issue. So it looks like probably someone said I think I saw in I I subscribe to a Fix. When I run that, it comes up with an EGR cooler. Haven't dug into that yet. Um, but then when I called Fix for backup, they're like, well, um, probably the 1-2 knock sensor or the SCR.
In other words, the SCR catalyst.
Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, for starters, I'd be looking at the field trends, both the percentage and then looking at the grams. In other words, milligrams or micrograms. See if there's one sticks out. Now, Monty, a while ago, if you guys recall, Monty from M&D, he told us about checking the EGR valve. I haven't forgotten that one, where he actually wants you to go ahead and shoot a flashlight through it. Obviously, you got to take it off, but in this case, shoot a light through it, see if you got any light, because any light is telling you that there is some EGR gas going by. So I called it the flashlight test, where he told you to shine it. Monty gave us that info a while back, if I remember it correctly. So therefore, you may want to check that too as well and what's going. But so I take it you haven't checked that. Oh, you said you haven't checked the EGR, so you may want to go after that there too.
EGR was replaced about 2 years ago for that code too.
Okay, well, I would still check it anyways
Yeah,
because Monty even said that he actually it's one of the old roundtable if you look it up in there, but even mentioned that he has tested fairly new ones too. So you may want to check that. It's just a flashlight test, no biggie, but it's a little bit more cumbersome to get to than to do it, but something you may want to check there. But yeah, if you can send us or email me a screenshot or text me a screenshot of of the actual fuel trims, I like to see where they're at, both cold and actually fairly warm and then warmed up above over 185. I mean, I'm going to put my cell phone number that you can actually text it to. Send me pictures of that so I can see what the fuel trims are. Again, lukewarm versus at operating temperature, but I need both the percentages and the milligrams grams. See where you're at there. That's might be tripping this code. Another thing, this is also a candidate that you may want to smoke test. So have we done a smoke test on the intake? See if we got any
I
potential
don't
small
have
leaks.
yeah, no.
You may want to check the leak checks if we got something going on there. And also, if you can also take a shot of where your mass airflow readings are at, and let's see where we're at. So with that too as well, see where your mass airflow, your load sensing sensors too are well, along with your map. I like to see where we're at there. So see what's going on there. See if we don't have again a skewed sensor, whether it being mass airflow or map, because those will cause it too as well. Anybody else like to throw their 2 cents worth to help Corey here? Anybody? Anybody? Help him out here. So, but yeah, definitely want to do that. Now the reductant quality, that one you're going to have to take a steady reading and try to read those NOx readings, see what's going on because reductant quality. But have you tested the reductant injector for volume and for spray?
Yeah.
And that all pass.
Um,
Okay, so that lays it out towards that's laying it. How many miles on this truck, by the way?
I think it's like 30,000. It's a plow truck, DPW, so it idles more than
Oh,
it,
she's got hours on
it's
her.
got about 7,500 hours.
Oh yeah. So in this case, oh yeah, she could be a candidate for a loaded. You may want to do this. This is a no-no, but due to the fact that she does a lot of that before you start looking at that NOx catalyst, you may want to run a few regions back to back.
But
The reason why is because we want to see if we might have heavily ammonia permeated catalyst because of the fact it sees a lot of idle time. But if that's the case, your injector tested fine, you still got that issue, I'm willing to bet that it's the NOx catalyst that's bad. We've seen that before too.
yeah, I think so. Sometimes it goes for a few months, and I do a forced regen, and it'll go for a couple more months. But now
Well,
it's getting more
yeah,
and more
she's
down to
permeated.
2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, she's permeated most likely. Do you have a company out there in your area that does cleaning? You can send it out for cleaning. So that
I don't
probably,
think so.
yeah, because that's what I'd be doing if that's the case. If it does if it does pause it for a while, it's definitely your NOx catalyst, the issue. So I'd be at this point in time, is going ahead and send it out for cleaning. That's what I'd be doing. So there you go. But yeah, send me those information on those trims and on those on the and on the map and map sensor, and I'll take a look at it and I'll try to give you an answer right away. So
Tony, Matthew chiming in here on this thing as well. And he said there's 7,500 hours on this thing. If you do the math on that, that's 225,000 miles equivalent versus the 30,000 that's on there. It makes me wonder how jammed up that EGR cooler may be as he was talking about EGR there. And I was talking to a Ford trainer here some time ago who said that he knew of a case down in, I think, Hawaii that their um, 6.7s idled so much down there that they were having to pull the intake runners off, the valve cover runners off, and actually they kept them exchanged because of all the carbon that was collected back in the intake
uh
system, which I guess in a case like this could even play with fuel trim too, not
yeah,
if
it
the
does.
airflow and all that. So if he's got all that extra idling time going on, that could be factored in too.
Yeah, Corey, have you looked behind that EGR throttle plate where it comes out towards away from when it comes from the charge air cooler? Have you looked behind to see how much carbon you got in there? Stick a
No,
flashlight in there, you can see it. Corey?
no, no, I haven't.
Yeah, it's really easy. Just take that tube off and behind that throttle plate, just force open that throttle plate by your hand or screwdriver and see if how heavily carboned up it is. And if that's the case, you may want to clean that up big time. But Take a look downstream. If you remove it, take a look downstream into that intake and see how it looks in there too with a boroscope if possible. But Matthew, you are correct. That is right. So very good, gentlemen.
The air, the throttle body, look down through the throttle body.
Yeah, because that's where the EGR gas comes in.
Okay. Yeah.
And right behind, that's where you get, it's a very common issue on these 6.7s too, not just idle ones, but you want to check behind or see if it's full of carbon. Make sense?
Yeah. So what's the process to clean that out?
We got to remove it and get some carb cleaner, or if you got a parts washer and start cleaning it. Just don't get any on the motor of don't get anything wet on the motor for the plate, the throttle plate.
Oh, so you're just cleaning the throttle body
Hmm
itself.
hmm hmm But just don't get any on that motor or the connection. So, but yeah, I've cleaned them. It's dirty affair. So, yes, sir.
Tony, I've had them actually. One here is so dirty that it literally on a D cell caused the engine to stall and then wouldn't build compression as a result. But I thought about what the problem was and went out and popped that CAC loose and got the flap loose again, got my compression back and brought it back and cleaned it up.
Yeah. But that could also mean a weak spring in it too. So that spring could be going out too.
True, which I think we ended up replacing that eventually, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Because it's supposed to keep it shut. It uses the motor to open it. So yeah. So there you go, Corey. There's a few things you got to check out, my friend. Hope that helps.
Sure does.
All righty. Very good. Thank you, Matthew, also for your input too. All righty. Any other comments or questions? Now's your time. Share up. Okay. Well, if anybody
So,
pops something up, I'll look for it. Oh, there's Matthew again.
Tony,
Yeah. Yeah.
Tony, this is Fred at Diesel Injection Systems. I have a quick question. I have a
Yes, sir.
2011 a Duramax that has sat for 4 years. It's derated to 4 miles an hour. I found the problem of being a DEF heater problem. Fix that. Um, I've done a couple of regens. I've changed the rear knock sensor, but I cannot get it out of derate. It's still 4 miles an hour. Uh, and I've Googled it and I've asked around, and some people say that the ECM is latched onto it and they have to change the ECM.
No, no,
I,
no.
I,
I've never had
I
that to
don't
be
know
the
about
case
that.
yet. No, no, no. I've never had that to be the case yet. No, I've discussed this before. First of all, on your scan tool, did you run a reductant fluid quality test?
Yes, it's been a while. I think it passed that. I've done the spray test. I've done the volume test, the quantity test. I've even tried playing with the knock sensor by spacing it out.
No, no,
To,
no. What I mean by that is on the scan tool, did you have the computer run that test?
yes,
Okay,
and it
now
passed.
here's my second. Yeah, I know, but the discussion that I had before with one that I was challenged was, are you sure that the truck was over 185 degrees Fahrenheit of engine coolant temp?
It won't let you run it if it's not correct.
No, it'll let you run it. Oh no, it'll let you run it.
Yeah, but yeah, it was at temperature because I went and drove it because I know the oil temp and coolant temp has to be up.
Okay, so here's the deal. Like I've discussed before, if the reductant fluid quality test on those models is to clear the code, is to actually get it out of D rate. The two things that can inhibit that from not unlocking, like you're saying, is either it needs an update flash, or B, you need to run that test above 185 ECT. So you need to read that scan tool and make sure it's reading above 185 because I've had them pass and it's at 160 and it didn't take it out of D rate.
Okay, okay,
So you got to verify that. So therefore,
and
make sure it's above 185. But obviously, if that doesn't work, then you need to make sure the truck has the latest reflash issues,
yeah, and
minding the fact that
I'm not
there
sure
is,
it does.
yeah, minding that there is no other code set related to that system, to the SER system. So there's no other code set, right?
No,
Okay,
no,
then
no,
yeah.
no, no course.
So therefore, yeah, do that. That should take it out of D rate. If not, give me a
Okay,
call and I'll help you out further with it. But no, that should take care of it.
okay, thank
So
you.
Tony, Matthew here in
yeah.
relation to that too. He say that he had a DEF heater problem? Is that what he
Yeah,
said had
and he
caused it?
replaced, and he replaced, and he says
So
he's got no
one of the
codes
other
now.
So one of the other things I've actually seen with that too is I've had to go in and command the heater to come on, so the computer knew that it was activated, and that will also take it out.
You know what? He's right. Yep, he's right. Matthew's got another good tip here. I forgot about that one. So, did you hear him? Make sure you get
Yes.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, I
cycle that
already did
heater.
that.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot about that one too, that you have to cycle that heater. But yeah. All right. If not, then you should pass it with that. Again, if that don't resolve it, then again, you need to do a update reflash. So, all righty. Very good. Thank you, Matthew, once again for that input because I forgot that little
Sure.
quick tip there too as well. So, all right. Any other comments or questions here? Any other comments or questions?
I have one, Tony, but I want to give
Go
any
ahead.
of the other guys the floor if they've got questions first. So I'll let that up to anyone else they want to, and then I do have a question.
Anybody? 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 All right, Matthew, go ahead. If they chime in, they chime in.
So recently, and this is not necessarily electrical diagnosis, but more so to do with um, running up against these trucks that are already tuned and whatnot. I have a scenario here in the shop that's more of a mechanical issue. It's a 2012 model 6.7 Cummins that we had done a cylinder head gasket, cylinder head replacement and gasket job about a little over a year and a part ago. And it was a truck that was tuned, previously come to our shop, tuned and deleted. They had already done it before it came here. And we, I think, had suggested putting a exhaust temp gauge in the thing, but the customer said, we're not really sure we want to do that. So it was a small fleet, etc. Well, here, over a year later, it comes back and the head gasket's blown. We take the cylinder head off and we find cracks in it. Take it to the machine shop and they find 20 some cracks in the base of the head. And I guess what I was just wanting to hear a little discussion about maybe is I've reached out to several machining and actually one engine company, and they're telling me that probably those crack marks are coming from in cylinder temperature, which makes sense. Um, but we had a heat tab on the machine shop had redone the cylinder head, and it had a heat tab on the front of the head, but not the very back. And they've since done that on the head we would put on. But I guess I just wanted to hear a little bit of discussion, um, maybe a little bit about the mechanics of heat transfer, and maybe that's more we can discuss on this particular call or whatever. But um, the engine company told me that obviously EGTs could be a problem, which we had put an EGT gauge temporarily before we tore it apart, and it didn't seem like it was crazy weld out. Um, but they also mentioned about cold starting, to start the engine cold and just going out and not warming the engine up can cause mechanical cracking, or basically the head and block are not warming up enough with the in cylinder temperature. Just want to hear any discussion or any input that anybody has on seeing those types of things. And then the second thing, that's part two of that, is in terms of torquing heads, how are you other shops finding in terms of retorquing, especially if you put studs in, which this one had. We put studs in it, and our machine shop had actually done a O-ringing of the head to keep from blowing head gasket. We had a truck a number of years ago on a 6.7 that was a heavy hauler and wasn't heavily tuned, but it was tuned and kept blowing gaskets after we were done. So we found out that we probably should O-ring. And since that time up until this truck, we had not had a problem. But just two different questions
So
there.
there's too many factors there, if you don't mind me saying, Matthew. I mean, the fact is, okay, they're running loaded and they're running a tune in it,
Mm-hmm.
and then the heat factor from that back pressure from that variable vane turbo, that just kills it. I mean, but yeah, putting a temperature, what do you call those sensors? A temperature sensor on the exhaust, it really
Pyro.
does help. Pyro, thank you. A
Mm-hmm.
pyro gauge, really would help there to keep them under control. But especially if they're working trucks. So therefore, that's one of the things because, when you talk about stress cracks and heat, that's all caused by excessive heat. And that excessive heat is brought on by running excess fuel and also running some excess back pressure because you're boosting so high. So, but anybody else like to help out Matt on that? Any question? Any engine guys? Any guys that do heads? Anybody? The guy to call on that is, who I'm going to have you call? I'm going to have you call, actually, you called him already, Brad over at, up in Montana, G&J. He knows those engines left and right. I think I'll send you his phone number there if you don't have it anymore. But Brad can
Yeah,
help you
do
with that.
do send me that, Tony.
Yeah, Brad is because he does a lot of work there, so I'll send you that info. So
Okay.
all right, I'll do it as soon as I finish this, so I won't forget Matthew. So
Thanks, Tony.
all
Thanks
right.
for everything.
With that said, quick things here, guys. Just to let you know, due to the fact that the on-demand courses have been available for a long time on the website, the hosting company just doubled their fees. I mean, literally doubled. So therefore, usually I'm fine with these acts with these videos as long as it pays for itself, and it hasn't been paying for itself. So it's at a negative big time. So we're about probably negative 500-600 bucks on it. So we're going to have to stop the bleeding. So here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be cutting off the on-demand courses. So this will be probably the last month. There's only one guy that I needed to check in because he's the only one that has an active subscription. I already checked. But what we're going to do is we're going to switch everything over to the Talent LMS because we've already been using the Talent LMS learning management system that we've been doing the Diesel Master course on. So therefore, we're going to make now segments of that. I already talked to them. So therefore, please note that we are going to be cutting off the on-demand courses because the costs are just too high. I mean, I've been eating too much already here. So therefore, those individual videos that you paid to watch and learn off of these powertrains are still going to be available, but there's going to be about 2 months where I'm not going to have much available because I'm going to redo a lot of these videos and a lot of these classes. So therefore, everything will be updated to the date. Not to mention some of them were pretty getting old, so therefore we'll definitely update. And a word to the wise, for those of you that have new techs in your shop and you want them to learn 6.0, for example, did you know that I do have for free on the YouTube channel, which is Diesel Talk with Tony Salas. I do have the, 3 or 4 part on 6.0. So if they never learned 6.0s, you can watch that there for free of charge. So therefore, I do give some freebies, but at the same time, I got to bring in some money too to pay for these websites and stuff, though. I don't have to tell you that the dieseltg.com website is another forum that you can ask questions like we do here in the roundtable. So therefore, it definitely is there. Okay. So therefore, visit the Diesel TG, sign up for free. You can actually have other techs, and Matthew's on there too, and other people are on there too using it. So therefore, we're going to try to get that moving even further with that. So just word of wise, the on-demand courses are going to come to an end. Again, their costs are just too high. And with that, what else do I got? One last thing, and that is, well, next week is Thanksgiving, right? So therefore, I'd like to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully, you all have a great holiday. We will have a December before Christmas. I'll put out the date there. You'll see the email on that, but we will have a December roundtable too as well. So therefore, hopefully, you can join us. And once again, I hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving and God bless you. And with that, I'm just about done. Any other comments or questions? Anthony, thank you for the happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So therefore, thank you, thank you. Again, happy Thanksgiving to all of you. And with that, we're going to close it up unless anybody has any last minute thing to say, but we're just about done. So with that said,
Tony, I did get one little thing I wanted to drop in here for you.
yep.
I saw on the Diesel TG site here the other recently, someone had posted about they were going back and forth on a 6.7 RAM application, having some difficulty there. And I did not post this as a reply. I think they did get some kind of solution to their problem. But I recently ran into a scenario that I think the shops might be could benefit with some of their customers. So we know that RAM came out with that emissions update come the end of last year, beginning of this year, and some of the complications that brings about in terms of reduced fuel economy, and also DEF consumption has went up, and that's obviously a negative for the customer. But what I didn't realize, but I did find out because I have a customer with a 2014 that ended up having a DEF module that had failed, and we did the repair, charged the customer, etc. But I got to finding out there is actually a bulletin out there called 67A that covers 2013 to 2018 model trucks, and then there's another one, and whatever. If they take the truck back into the dealer and have had that update done or get it done, there are certain emissions components that are covered up to about 4 years from the point of I'd have to get the exacts, but there's a certain mileage and a certain year coverage that covers some of these more expensive components on the emissions. And in my customer's case, I just got a note this morning because I helped him file afterwards. He's going to get money back for us doing the repair. I'm not suggesting that we do that, but more suggesting that if we got an emissions thing that they have ran into, we could, if we wanted to, refer them to having some of those components per the bulletin, obviously reading that they could possibly
Yeah.
have covered.
Yeah, if you can post that on the Diesel TG, I would appreciate it, saying what is covered if possible. I know you're busy,
Okay.
man, but if you get time,
Yep.
better have documented there. So
Sure.
thank you. Yeah, good
Okay.
info.
And happy Thanksgiving to you too, Tony, and thanks for
Happy
everything.
Thanksgiving. Yes, you all take care of yourselves. With that said, gentlemen, God bless, and we'll see you next month.